This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and so the pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to our regular meeting of council for Monday, May 30th at 7 o'clock. This meeting is going to be held in a hybrid fashion, so members of council, the public, and the staff can participate in this meeting either virtually or in person here in the council chamber. So you'll see some people participating through the screens here in the council chamber as well. Tonight, council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Murray, second by Councillor Curran. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. And one item to note, though, is the withdrawal of the delegation. Sorry, item number 4. We are rescheduling. I believe it was it health reasons for somebody in the group, or the personal matter? Personal matter. Anyway, we will be rescheduling the North Shore Young Civic Forum delegation at their request. And so first up on the item on the agenda here, I don't believe we have 2 sets of minutes that have been circulated. Council, are there any errors or omissions from the April 4th regular meeting council minutes or the April 25th regular council meeting minutes? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of both sets of those minutes? Moved by Councillor Back. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Murray. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries, and the minutes from those previous 2 meetings are now adopted. At this time, we reserve a period of up to 30 minutes at the front end of every regular meeting of council for input from the public. We do have a sign-up sheet that is managed by our clerk. And on that, I don't have many sign-ups tonight. In fact, I have one sign-up that has actually requested to speak at the item. This is at item 8.5. Mr. Teven, you indicated before the meeting that you'd like to speak. Would you like to speak now, or would you like to speak at item 8.6? Happy to speak now. Welcome. Come on up to the front. I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation set up on the
PowerPoint file. I wouldn't exactly call it presentation. It's a couple of photos. Thank you very much. If you could turn on the projector for a PowerPoint. Just for the record, Peter Tevan, 1900 block, Indian River Crescent.
Welcome.
Thanks. I'm just waiting for the. Oh, it's there. I'm getting all confused. Thank you. Thank you, Worship and Council. I'm here to comment on item 8.6, which is the amendments to the creation of a tree protection bylaw. And I just want to touch on a couple of points. First of all, I'm always disappointed when I see first, second, and third reading all at once. I don't understand the rush in this particular case. We don't have a deadline unless there's some imminent lot clearing that is about to occur. I am aware, and I am considerate of the motivation for this bylaw. Is we had a couple of lots, one in particular I seem to remember, that were heavily treed and were virtually clear cut. I get what a disappointment that is. I get what a detriment it is to our environment. One of the concerns I have about this is on the notations in the package. I saw no review by Fire and Rescue Services Department. Other departments did review it. And having participated, and if you recall at the workshop, I had disclosed to you that I had participated in the Interface Fire Risk Assessment Program put on by Fire and Rescue Services, where they came out, surveyed my home and property in relation to the district-owned greenbelt behind us, and made some recommendations. And I would say, based on those recommendations, that this bylaw is at odds with what Fire and Rescue Services are telling citizens to do for fire risk mitigation. Because in that case, they recommended I take out a row of hedge trees, and I know hedge trees may not be subject to bylaw, but we don't know in advance what they are going to recommend. I would also point out that this is adding administrative red tape onto private property rights. And I always am very leery of that. And as I say, I do get what we're trying to achieve, but I think this is a case where we're using a club to hammer in a finishing nail, so to speak. And therefore, my conclusion is, I believe that this bylaw is overreach. Then we have to consider what we allow in the case of developments. And here's a picture of the 3400 block of Mount Seymour Parkway and the devastation of trees that was done there. This is the overhead of the district's own mapping system. And I've overlaid the property lines with a green line. And you can see from the photograph going right next to the sidewalk, a line of trees that were all cut down. You can see the overhead of the trees in the old satellite image. And a private property owner would ask this: why are we so worried about controlling their rights on their private property when there clearly are some trees here that were owned by the district that were clear cut without a moment's thought? It doesn't seem to be consistent to me. And therefore, my conclusion is this is not the right solution for our problem. I believe it's overreach. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Teeman. And I have no other speakers that have identified themselves ahead of time, but I do note that there's a virtual hand up from Hanson on the meeting. Can we move Mr. Hanson Colbert over to the regular meeting? So. And again, the period of public input is for up to 30 minutes at the front end of the meeting. So if anybody else would like to add their comments, once Mr. Colbert has finished his comments, I'm going to keep coming back and seeing if other people would like to speak. Just raise your hand either in person here or your virtual hand online, and we'll do what we can to get you connected to the meeting. Mr. Colbert, can you hear me? Try again. Mr. Colbert, can you hear me? You're marked as muted. Okay. There we go. I think I heard you for a moment. Mr. Colbert, can you hear me? You're unmuted on our side, so if you have a mute on your microphone or somewhere else, okay. Does anybody else wish to speak in the public input period? Mr. Colbert, check back in. Can you hear me?
Hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can. There you are. Hazen, can you hear me? Oh, no.
Anyone hear me now?
Yes, I can. Hazen, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Mayor Little, again, I just want to mention what happened is, again, if there is a delay in promoting someone to the panel, regrettably, because of the technology setup I have, it takes a while. I'm going to be short here. All I wanted to say is that, and it's based on an email that I sent most of you, although two of you don't want to receive emails from me, so you didn't get it. There is a land sale that's now been suggested or being promoted on Lynn Valley Road, and the broker, the land broker, it's a very good company. It's Avison Young. I know them very, very well. And the two properties are on Lynn Valley Road. They are adjacent to both the Black Bear and to the Safeway site. And the issue is that in the marketing material and in the prospectus, they actually state very clearly that they've been working with district staff for 2 years in order to structure this land sale so that it can accommodate the building of a 60-unit, whether it be strata or rental, strata owned or rental, but a 60-unit apartment building. So those 60 units, when added to the already publicly available development applications for the Black Bear and Safeway, we're now up to nearly 700 units in that very, very tight space. I think that based on the community input that I've received, people are not actually really, well, they actually are really upset about this, but one of the things they would like to see is, why can't we have one development planner, one person, who is responsible for these 3 applications, so they could come together. And the reason I'm speaking actually tonight is because by happenstance, I know that you've got 2 extraordinarily good planners, and I'm not going to mention them by name. You guys should know who they are by now. You've got 2 of the best in the Lower Mainland, but neither one of them have been applied to deal with these Lynn Valley applications, and I find that really strange. Okay, these 3 applications, 700 units, really, you need to have someone who is deeply experienced, trained, and educated. And with all due respect, the people that are presently have been assigned to these applications, they would be better assigned elsewhere, and to have one of those other 2 people in the district working on these. So I'm going to ask Councillor Forbes and Councillor Murray, especially Councillor Forbes, because she's so well versed on this stuff. Let's get the best possible talent assigned to this stuff, okay? Mayor Little, thank you, and Council, thank you, and staff, thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Colbert. Would anybody else like to address the council in the public hearing or public portion of the meeting? We've got Juan Palacio coming to join us in person here in the council chamber. Welcome, Juan. We're just going to get the microphones turned on there for you on the desk.
Hello, Your Worship and members of council. So this is pretty brief, and it's just, I went to the shipyards and saw the events going down there. There was live singing and food trucks and an area that was set for alcohol allowed. And it seems like they've recently been setting up lots of events and things like this, shipyards. And I feel like the district doesn't do that enough. So I think that the district, not sure if we already have a certain fund or money put towards these public events, but I think we need to do more of them for the people, because we need this. Otherwise, we're left kind of boring in comparison. A lot of people don't know that there's the difference between North Van and North Van, so they just assume that it's exciting, but I feel like we're getting quite boring. So we should have more public events like this with food trucks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see no further speakers to the public input. And so at this time, I'm going to move on with the regular agenda. And like I said at the front end, item number 4, delegations, that was at the request of the delegation, we're going to reschedule their delegation to council, which moves us on to the number 8, which is reports from council or staff. And the first report that we have up this evening is the North Vancouver Rcmp update. And I'd like to call on Superintendent Will Yee to come forward. And welcome. This is our very first time having Superintendent Yee here in the council chamber and meeting the council officially. Some of us have been able to meet Will through police committee meetings and other opportunities in the community. Will comes to us from the IHIT group, and so where he achieved his inspector status there and then promoted to superintendent, and so he was involved in very serious homicide investigations, I believe, throughout the province of BC, but certainly in the Lower Mainland, where he gained a tremendous amount of experience and has come over to join us here, I believe, since August of last year. Would that be about right?
September.
September?
September
Well, yeah. And so our former superintendent, Gallup Bayani, was promoted to chief superintendent within the region, and we were able to bring in Will Yee to come and support us and the city of North Vancouver here, and we're very happy to have you here. Looking forward to your presentation tonight, which I believe will just be covering some of your plans for the next little bit, and then I do actually have a presentation to make to you at that time. So the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come meet some of you in person. I hope to meet the rest of you as the time permits and we move forward. What I'd like to do is just, it's been 9 months since I actually took post, and a lot of time has been spent inside detachment due to our COVID restrictions, which allowed me to give a good, or get a good understanding of the workflow and how the internal business is working and creating efficiencies and looking at how we're going to leverage what resources we do have to sustain the strategic plan that has already been put forward, as you well know. Some of the pieces that I've been focusing on in some of the meetings, traffic safety, and I'll start with that one. Traffic safety is a big component of the city and the district. And hearing from another different venues from school board committees, the community committees, our community volunteers, we've started to identify different areas within the district particularly. I won't speak on the city portion because although it's all, to me, it's one big amalgamation in terms of my police enforcement, but specifically the areas that we've dealt with here. What we've done is we're using metric-based analysis to look at where our high traffic flow system days are in the streets that actually present a problem to us. So around the Bellbrook area and so forth, we've got a number of complaints in that area, and we provided 6 various types of varying enforcements in that area. We've also started looking at deploying these cardboard cutouts as a visual deterrent, and they're quite effective as well, just to curb behavior, because that's what we're trying to do, is curb the behavior of individuals rather than punitive violation tickets. Because again, when it's necessary, for sure, but we also want to put forward a positive message. So with that positive message, we've also initiated through our metric system, when members go to the schools, they'll log in at the school that they've attended the school at before arrival time and departure time during the school day. And from February to April, the end of our fiscal year, we've managed to capture 84 different visits to different schools within the district area. That has a very significant impact, because when we talk to the school board and the members of the community, they've indicated they've noticed a lot of members showing up there, and it's to engage with the students. It's also to engage with the public, to let them know that we are visibly in those public spaces and that we're there for support. And it also curbs that, quickly drop off the child and speed off routine, right? It makes people more aware that we are present. So we're continuing with that initiative all the way through, and that's with our frontline police officers as well as our traffic units. We also want to collaborate, like with the city. I've been speaking a lot with the city planners and looking at different ways we can utilize basically those traffic strips where we can identify high traffic areas of significance. The reason for that is that when people tell me, like, say, Capilano, we have a speeding problem, it's difficult to isolate at what part of Capilano or Lynn Valley and what time of day. So if we use these metrics already built in for tracking volume, we'll be able to more efficiently deploy our resources to be more effective with dealing with the issues that are plaguing our communities, right? So another part of that is where we're looking at environmental calming measures too, that make sense, because again, putting roundabouts everywhere does not make sense. Putting traffic officers at every subsidiary intersection because the main arteries are plugged does not make sense. There's only so many that we can go around. So we look at those high crash areas and also the high volume and high speed zones. And we'll focus on that because that's really where our problem areas are. And it's been quite effective to date. We also, last year, we ran 32 volunteer road safety initiatives. So again, using volunteers to help curb the behavior, and also looking at when there are those high problem street areas, putting up those flashing deterrent signs that your speed is. And what we've noticed within the city that it's created from their statistics that it's a 7% drop in speed from what they are doing. So they are somewhat effective when we're not around. We also had our youth intervention unit. They also did 5 safety initiatives with ICBC in collaboration to Think of Me program. So basically providing reflectors to kids and just getting that awareness out again at the schools and so forth. So we're continuing on there. For our public spaces, what we've been trying to do is also to collaborating with the parks patrols as well as the city bylaws and district bylaws. Our goal is to pick strategic days where we can partner up members with the bylaws people to help with visibility and enforcement, and also to get our members familiar with some of the pain points that the bylaws are facing, so that's more collaborative. They're in our building and it makes sense. We're also bringing back the foot patrols. So 1 for one if we're doing a low patrol, we also will do a parks patrol at the same time. So we want to make sure we have that high visibility and make sure that we're approachable for anything, whether it's just greeting kids and making sure they understand that we're not here to put them in jail and make sure that they study. It's also to make sure that they can come to us and build that public confidence and trust. Because a big part of it is that creating that approachability for the public. There's a lot of negative press that's going around, and we want to make sure that whatever's happening in other communities isn't happening here, and that's a big focal point too. So a part of that, we're also leveraging our metrics when we see hotspots. So part of that is looking at our crime stats and identifying where there's a lot of criminal activity in certain areas, like theft from vehicles or break and enters or so forth, or property crime. Basically, what we want to do is utilize that metric base and then turn into our resources and focus saturating that area so that we have that visibility and we can interdict or displace and keep them moving, because the bottom line is that if we don't keep pressure on the criminals, most of them aren't from here. There's other ways that they access the North Shore, and part of it's through the public transit or within vehicles by themselves. So we're focusing on things that don't make sense. So 3 o'clock in the morning, we have a lot of foot travelers around the industrial area. You probably will get rechecked, because there's no reason for you wearing a backpack and balaclava and have cutting tools, right? So our members are being very, conditioned to make sure that they understand what we're looking for through those metrics. It is working. What we've noticed is that along the Key and Fibs Exchange, we're down roughly about 13.5% for calls for service in those areas through our metric-based analysis. And that's what we're trying to do, is really understand and leveraging technology to make sure that we're using our resources efficiently and actually attacking the problem and not guessing where deployment should be. As far as the response time, one of the things we've always tried to say as part of the strategic priority is reduce the priority 1 and priority 2 calls for service and the time that it takes us to react. Our dispatch time is quite good in the Lower Mainland, actually. From our comm center, it's the lowest, even that of Econ. So that part's outstanding. But we also want to make sure that we can put our members where they're needed. So we've also collaborated with one of the 5 other detachments in the Lower Mainland, and we've created and been part of this online study where we're taking online complaints. What that does is it allows a lot of members to be freed up, so that when individuals of the public just need file numbers for, say, a theft of bicycle, and they don't have any descriptors, or they're just looking for something where they need file number for insurance purposes, or just reporting that this was lost, that can be done very quickly, and it doesn't require member attendance. So that creates that extra efficiency that we can actually respond to the priority 1s and priority 2s. We also restructured our frontline policing. So we've added a new unit called the Investigative Support Team. And what that is 2 members that are attached to every single watch. What they do is they're allowed to investigate the crimes that are a little bit more serious, that require 24-hour attention. So when 2 members get, say, a missing person file or a high-risk individual who's in crisis, those 2 members will be tasked to deal with that file specifically and are not being dispatched to the other files. So what that does is that they'll maintain continuity, and when the 2 newest members come on the night shift or the day shift, there's a complete rollover. So we basically have 24/7 coverage on that file. So again, it's so we don't have that lapse where there's the 4 on 4 off, and there's a 4-day wait period, because again, that creates a loss of evidence perhaps and so forth. I can tell you that works. We just recently on Sunday, and I won't get into specifics of it, but we had a unlawful confinement file. All we had was vehicle description, one witness, and CCTV that wasn't able to identify either party or just the actions. We were able to locate, it was a violent exchange, and we were able to use that same team to identify and arrest the individual and determine who the parties were before the end of shift, because you were able to focus on that. So the test is there. So as far as using other technologies to save time for us, we've also been using our bait bike program, and we've been able to use the bait car as well. And what we've done since January 1st, April 13th, we recovered 13 stolen bikes, and by putting out our IS teams, as well as curbing and catching a number of individuals who are actively stealing the bikes. So for social impact, everyone's heard about our CAR 22 and the mental health piece. That is a big portfolio for us, and that's a portfolio I have a strong belief in. We have a very high number of mental health calls within the city and district. There's a lot of people who are in crisis when we meet them. What's happened last year when we did the pilot project, we had 629 files related to mental health individuals for calls of service. And the average time for members is between 4 minutes and 129 to 200 minutes in dealing with it, and often at 3 to 4 members at a time being tied up in the hospital. By creating this IAD unit with, we have a mental health nurse as well as a social worker nurse. They work 7 days coverage, our team does, and then we have the varying days where the nurses are also on board. What that's done for us is we've been able to free up the frontline officers to get back to their normal course of duty and have trained professionals deal with these people in crisis. Our goal is to create a system down the road, and I want to create a hub-like style system where we can identify people who are, I guess, frequent individuals in our system, so we can keep them out of crisis and remove some of the barriers and help stabilize their life and lifestyle so that they stay out of, I guess, our environment. Because again, it's very important that we can understand that there's a multitude of reasons as to why they are in the situation they are, and it's not just because they're involved in criminality. It's more complicated than that. And I think that's the big thing that we're trying to teach our officers. So we've gone into extensive training with our officers to help them understand some of the complications with this, and that a person in crisis doesn't often have to be a violent individual who's non-compliant. We might have to use other skills and bring other people that are trained to deal with this. And our CAR 22 has been very effective to deal with that. We've also, in terms of metrics, our mental health apprehensions by using this unit has decreased by 29% this year. So it's been very effective. As far as investment into our community, we've also been very strong and really keeping our IFNU program working. I've been trying to meet with a number.
You're going to have to watch the acronyms.
Sorry, yes.
Rcmp are famous for their acronyms. IFNU is Integrated First Nations Unit. There you go.
I apologize. Yes, we are famous for a multitude of acronyms. Our Integrated First Nations Unit, it's the only one in Canada. And what we do have is 2 individuals who are part of, who are Indigenous descent themselves. And the unit specifically assists with problems with associated nation, whether it be to bridge the gap between some of our officers that are going to attend. There is a preference to deal with the Integrated First Nations unit first, and then deal with our regular members. I've been working with the various nations to try and develop an understanding of some of their pain points to help leverage what I can do to make the transition and move to reconciliation a little bit easier in terms of developing trust, because that's a big part of the reconciliation pieces, gaining their trust so we can understand how to collaboratively resolve some of these issues. one of the things that I did notice with the AFNI unit, if you remember, there was a shooting in on the Capilano Reserve. Our AFNI unit did attend in assistance with West Vancouver, and there also was, they did request for us to attend, even though it was a West Vancouver jurisdiction. So we worked collaboratively with West Vancouver, and our AFNI unit assisted with some of the drumming ceremony and healing and so forth. So very positive results from that deployment. So 64 referrals to the if new services were made this year, and 100% of our staff have taken on and completed trauma-informed training to make sure that we understand how to move forward with reconciliation issues and bias-free policing. As far as greenhouse emissions, I'll just touch on that point. I can't say that I'm a big believer as far as electric vehicles for police use at this point in time, because until they become, we have faster electric chargers that allow us to charge our cars faster than 40 minutes to an hour, it becomes somewhat ineffective for us. So we are exploring hybrid vehicles, and for the non-pursuit type vehicles, we are looking at different options. In fact, we're also looking at for some of the trails and so forth, employing scooters and so forth too, so we can cover more ground, but and gain more visibility. Because there's a lot of trails in the district and in the city. So again, that's a pilot project. We've also trained more people on our boat patrol course, as well as our bike course, because we're bringing that back too. So you'll see a lot of officers on the water and on the trails on bikes, hopefully this summer. As far as everything else goes, I just want to say I'm very invested in developing new operation models that focus on leveraging technology to create efficiencies. I want to say that a lot of the reasons for that is that we can deploy resources more efficiently, less waste, and more effective sort of strategic policing initiatives. We'll be able to keep this community safe, as well as build that public confidence and trust. One of the big things I want to really push forward is that I really look forward to the cross-sector collaboration, and hoping that I can meet a lot more of the people within the district and the city of North Vancouver to collaborate more, to understand how we can leverage our services and create, I guess, efficiencies all around. So that's the high level stuff. I hope I gave you enough information for now. If there's any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be moving receipt of your report. Seconder, Councillor Hanson, you have your hand up. Councillor Hanson. Just my comments on it. It's there's obviously policing is complex in any jurisdiction, and it sounds like you are going to have a lot on your plate over the next term that you're here. I look forward to working with you and making sure that you have the proper supports from the municipality to complete your objectives. Councillor Hanson, your comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, we've had the pleasure of meeting already at, because I sit on the police committee, and I have taken away from those committee meetings your passion and for public safety, commitment to this community. I've used those words in describing your efforts in the past. When I've had a chance to speak to the public about your role. We, of course, have an extremely safe community, and I thank you for the role that you've played in ensuring that safety. However, there is one category of crime that does persist in a stubborn way, and that's break-ins of cars and thefts from cars at night and so forth. And I think you mentioned in your presentation, you said these people, the offenders, are coming from other areas, I think is a phrase that you used. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could talk a little bit about where these people come from and what type of a strategy we might adopt to address that issue in some of our communities where this is a stubborn problem.
So some of the strategies obviously is empty your car. That's primary. We get complacent, and even with the an empty bag, it still looks, it's an opportunity. So first of all, we have to educate individuals to lock their cars, take out their valuables, and be mindful of where they park their vehicles and so forth. So that's part of it, is curbing the behavior of the property owners. Secondly, what we have been doing, and through our police committee metrics, we've shown you that when we do find a high amount of theft from vehicles in a concentrated area, we actually deploy our covert assets, so our covert plainclothes officers, and start saturating those high theft periods, as well as putting overt patrols in those areas. Because again, some of those people that I can't identify where they're from, we know who they are, and we know sort of their MO or their patterns, and what they like to steal and how they like to steal. So whenever that occurs, we have been effective, and you can see we've shown to the heat maps that there might be 13 theft from vehicles from say along Queens area, and then when we do the deployment, it drops the following week to 3. And we're not going to eradicate the program until these people are really taken away completely, which is next to impossible because there's so many of varying factors as to why they're doing what they're doing. But we are targeting those areas. We can't publish exactly how we're doing it, but the metrics I'm able to share with you, and that's part of that strategy. A part of it also too is for some of the theft from vehicles is using the community, and I know when summertime comes for malls and so forth, and making people aware that we want the community policing program to start flagging vehicles that have items that we can see to remind people to, if I can see it, so can the criminals, right? So forth. That's the best way we can get that information out there. And also we're looking at exploring the availability of, basically letting people know through our crime prevention offices, the particular areas that of our concern, and what they should be doing in conjunction with our enforcement initiatives.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Back, your comments?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Getting a bit of feedback here. Thank you very much for your presentation. Really great to meet you. I know we've met one-on-one at an event in Lynn Valley, and it's nice to see you again. Thanks for the update on all the different areas. Mostly just a comment. I'm really pleased to see some of the things you're doing and continuing to do around the CAR 22. I'm very supportive of that, and obviously it's successful in how we look at mental health and treat mental health calls, as well as the integrated First Nations unit. That's something that we should be very proud of, and I'm glad to hear that that's continuing to work well. And I'm really interested in the school drop-off and your presence there. That's been really appreciated, I know, by many. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously safety in school drop-offs is a big deal, but speeding in our community is happening everywhere, and we're regularly getting emails from residents about different areas. You mentioned Delbrook as one corridor. What are your thoughts on lower speed limits in some of these areas? The 30K conversation comes up. I know it's something that we've discussed as a council. Any thoughts on that? And yeah, obviously appreciate just more enforcement wherever we can to try and deal with some of these areas, and we're doing what we can from the transportation side as well.
The 30K enforcement, I think obviously it does help because the lower speed creates lower damage when impact does occur. However, I still think we still need to use the traffic strips to identify these high collision areas as well, because there's many streets where that isn't necessarily a problem, and we still need to identify the streets that are particularly a problem. So whether they're 50 or whether they're 30, it doesn't really change my outlook as to terms of how I need to deal with the actual issue. And the issue is identifying the streets of concern and creating a strategy that makes sense for that area, and finding the time of day and frequency patterns to make sure that we can deal with it effectively. Right? So at this point, I think it's early to say what the results of that are, because I guess the city is also exploring the 30K speed limits on the secondary routes. And again, from enforcement initiative, it has merit, but it's not going to change what I need to do, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does. And when you are looking at different strategies for some of these areas, are you working closely with our transportation staff?
So that's the next step.
Yeah.
The first conversations I've had with the city, and now that with COVID and everything else that's lifted, and just trying to get things in place, it is. I've met a number of people from the district, and we will be working towards that.
That's great. Great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murray, your comments.
Thanks, Mayor Little, and thank you for your presentation, Superintendent. And it's nice to have you in the council chambers, and one day we'll all be there. So thanks again. And yes, obviously, you know, a couple of things on the top of the list in the district. Always traffic, always speed has been for decades one of the big issues. And certainly, you know, over at least the last 10 years, the number of break-ins that we get in particular areas, particularly in the Seymour, we get a lot of break-ins, car break-ins. There was just one on my street a few weeks ago, smashed windows and that kind of thing. And we are really good on our community pages to make sure that we're encouraging people to report everything, even if it was a quarter that was taken out of the car, we need to report it to the Rcmp. So anything you can do, you know, to get that message out more to people when you're, you know, in the community or community events, to make sure that people know that reporting is the key to being able to, you know, catch the people that are breaking into these cars. And I really appreciate your comments that, you know, the people that are doing this, there's complexities to the path that they're on, and there's challenges. It's not a simple fix by any means. I'm just wondering in regards to the, you know, because we do have significant traffic issues on the North Shore, 2 ways on and off, and it's a challenge. And is the enforcement of the Rcmp consistent year to year as far as the amount of resources that are being put into enforcing, you know, speed? Obviously, you know, the Parkway, you know, the upper levels is it's a highway. You know, locally, the Parkway is a really fast road. You know, Lonsdale Mountain Highway, Lynn Valley Road, Capilano. There's all, you know, sorts of excessive speeding in those areas. Are those resources spread evenly every year, and do they remain constant year to year?
That's a tough question.
Big question. There you
It's
go.
a big question. That's a complex question. Let me say that. I can't speak to whether it's consistent from previous years because I just arrived, but sort of what I see is that my goal. So first, about the resourcing issue, my goal is to try and restaff the detachment as quick as I can and fill all the vacancies, because that will answer that next question of, are the resources being distributed evenly? Right now, we still have a dedicated traffic section, but it is half its strength as it normally would be because of just vacancies, people with long-term illness, a whole host of multitude of factors. So what we're doing is actually we've got a number of experienced police officers that are actually want to be in North Vancouver, and I've managed to curry interest in a few of them. So we will have our first one in the first week in June, who's basically re-signed up and wants to be here. So which is great for us because there's very little training. So once we can do that, yes, we will have full-time traffic sections that will provide that consistent service all over. I won't say that our pattern is to provide even distribution, because if we do that, then it becomes, okay, at 4 o'clock, we know we slow down at this particular instance. What we have been doing though is, the reason for we wanted to bring the bike courses, when we have those high volume sort of slowing of traffic around the cut, we'll deploy our bike patrol, which are be our traffic members, and they will look for distracted drivers. They will sometimes do like an information sort of awareness campaign, sort of be aware this is what's happening, and they will also be coupled with enforcement. So again, our goal is to build trust, but also to curb behavior, right? And it's a tough goal when it comes to traffic, because everybody wants it, but nobody wants to get the ticket, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing a protracted approach to build that trust, and again, still focus on the enforcement when it's necessary. So if there are those high volume areas, our traffic sergeant is the perfect guy to provide that conduit of information to, and we'll ensure, and I've given him the directive to, if you get a request, conduct an analysis and look at what we can do, and if there's more information that we require, like putting traffic strips down or doing various types of enforcement along those routes, then we will do so. So I hope
Thank
that
you.
answers it.
Yeah, no, that was good. And just on our ability to be able to have a full complement within the RCMP, is it getting more challenging to find the hires to be able to maintain a full complement? Is that, we know we're hearing lots right now about our doctor shortage in the province. That's becoming more serious, and I know the Premier has met with the federal government in regards to funding and how we're going to fix this ever-growing problem. But is law enforcement the same challenge in regards to new hires, and are the new generations stepping up as much as they did in the past? Another hard question.
Another hard question. I guess it's subjective of, how old you are, how you want to particularly answer that question. I guess for me,
I'm really young. The mayor is quite old, but I'm quite young.
I see that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good answer.
So I'm quite old, so I have very traditional values. When I look at it, I wouldn't say the young are that much different. It's just finding ways to reach them, to get them to understand what we think is important and finding that common ground. That's a difficult challenge because, again, we grew up differently. I grew up differently than the generation now. They're not used to the type of research. I opened a book. I read a lot of documents. The new generation is Google and internet, right? And a lot of that is quick, instantaneous gratification. So they're also experiencing that. So in their personal life, they also want that in their work life. So I want to, move to plain clothes after a year. Well, you have to develop some foundational pieces. So that is a struggle for us. As far as resourcing across the law enforcement spectrum, the Rcmp is not unlike the municipal departments. A lot of attrition has occurred with new agencies, such as one that's developing a new police force and drawing lots of members from all sorts of areas, including Rcmp and municipal agencies. That creates a vacancy pattern. With COVID, we shut down our training facility for basically a year and a half. So now we have a year and a half of deficit from retirements and vacancies there. So it is challenging. I've been able to work really hard at aggressively filling our vacancies and looking for as many reasons as I can based on the population size and per capita. And I'm using the metrics to basically leverage my senior managers, some of them you do know, and saying, well, you know the issues here, but per capita, we have a file count, and this is where I look at other detachment commanders. Coquitlam, say, has 260 members, but their file count might be 40 between 16 members. Our file count is between 50 to 70 between 12 members. And at best times, we might have 8 because of sickness and so forth. So we're managing to do more with less. And they find it busy over there. So when I use that sort of an argument, I've been very successful in getting recruits. We have 2 more recruits that are coming, and I hope by September I'll have less than 5 vacancies on the board because there is a attrition period. And I'm also working at trying to get the people who are off on long-term illnesses to get an understanding as to how I can help them get back to work, find out what they need, and how can I support them with creating different sort of job opportunities for some or modifications so that we can get them back gradually into the office. So it's a difficult time, but I'm working on it.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Council, we've had a good opportunity to discuss the matter. It's been moved and seconded I'm going to call the question on receipt of the verbal presentation here today. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. At this point, I'm going to ask Superintendent to join me inside the circle here as we do a bit of an installation ceremony of sorts. On behalf of the Council of the District of North Vancouver, thank you for your commitment to our community. We see our community as being one that is a safe, clean, compassionate community with a close connection to nature. And I see that the Superintendent of the Rcmp has a significant role in maintaining those priorities in those communities. So my commitment to you on behalf of Council is to help give you the support you need to be able to be successful in those goals. But on behalf of the Council, thank you very much for your commitment to our community. Thank you very much. Great, fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, Council, moving on with the regular business items. The next item is up for adoption, so it's not up for debate. This is item 8.2, extension of temporary outdoor business areas to March 31st. Someone at Council be willing to move the staff recommendation? I've got moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Back. There's no debate on adoption. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is item 8.3. This is bylaws 8549, 8559, 8565. Regulatory bylaw amendments, increase maximum fine for the Offence Act prosecutions. This item is referred back from a regular meeting of Council, and so it is up for adoption, so no debate. Will a member of Council be moving a staff recommendation? I have Councillor Back. Is there a seconder on the matter? I have Councillor Forbes. There's no debate on adoption. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item that we have up is 8.4. This is the required amendment for to general local election bylaw 6876 1996. Before I hand it over to the clerk, I will say, you know, I've gone through this item and I'd have to characterize this as largely housekeeping. I couldn't find a material difference between the old wording and the new, really just bringing it into line with the new legislation. Does that represent your view on the matter?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. Characterize it as a housekeeping item. I think Ms. Lands, as the Chief Election Officer, has done a good job of explaining it in her report. However, I'll be able to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Curran, I see your hand. Are you seconding it? Yes. Okay. I have no further comments on it. As I said, I don't see it as being material change, really just bringing in line with the new clauses in the provincial statutes, and so I will be supportive. Councillor Curran, any comments?
Just a clarification. It seemed like the most substantive change was actually that anyone could vote by mail-in ballot,
Yes.
Whereas before that to me seemed like the most substantive change to it. And I just wanted to understand a bit more, because I was following some stuff that was happening in other municipalities where they were opening up. I'm very supportive of mail-in ballots because I think it provides the opportunity for more folks to participate. But is any comments on that? Was that something we could choose to adopt or not? I was unclear what the legislation, if that changed it or we chose to do that, but I think it's a good step to do so.
Your Worship, to Councillor Curran, you're perfectly correct. That is the most significant change, and maybe is a little outside the scope of the term housekeeping. That's what we started with, and there's a few associated really housekeeping items, but you're correct. That is the most significant change, and that is a change in the Local Government Act. That was the province taking away those restrictions. As the old wording was previously, it was those unable to attend on general voting day, or those will be absent from the community on any voting day. In the COVID era, the province struck that from the books, opened it wide open, so you can vote at advanced voting days, general voting day, or by mail, no other restrictions. So we have to come into compliance with the federal or the provincial legislation. Our bylaw was incorrect and inconsistent. We have to strike that out of the bylaw. That's what we're doing, just simply removing it.
It's
So
just-
to clarify, mail ballot voting is open to anybody who filled out an application.
But to be clear, that was our practice in the past anyways, that anybody that applied, we weren't jurying whether or not they had an adequate reason to not be in the community at the time. We simply, on application, we granted them mail-in ballot.
The declaration, the application included the declaration, and we did not go beyond that in terms of how truthful that declaration was. And with the school trustee by-election in May of last year, we sought our ministerial order to waive that, and the province is granting those regularly. That's why the legislation was changed to make that consistent, and that's where we'll be from 2022 forward.
So it hadn't been our practice to reject requests for mail-in ballots anyway, but this, you're correct, does formalize that it's allowed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be important probably to better promote that. I don't think people necessarily think of local elections as mail-in in the same way, because you get the ballot from Elections VC for other, and you won't actually get a ballot, right, to remind you. So it would just be a communications piece on our end to make sure that folks know that that's an option.
But again, the person will have to request the mail-in package. It won't automatically go out to everybody in the community. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. And to Councillor Kern's point, yes, we will be promoting that heavily. It's much like electronic meetings, voting by mail at all levels is a new reality. So we'll certainly be promoting that. And yes, the way we need to register those people and get the contact information on how to send the ballot out, that does require the application process. It's just simply an administrative part of getting them a mail ballot. And we'll promote that.
And that's an online process to, or is that a mail-in? Do they have to mail in to become a mail-in, or is it an online to get a mail-in ballot?
It'll be handled a number of ways. There will be people that walk in the front door and say, "Can I apply?" We'll hand them a piece of paper. They'll fill it out and give it to us right then and there. There'll be others who will be able to print that from the web. I'm not sure if it's a fillable PDF yet, but that makes sense. Otherwise, they can print it and send it in to us, scan it, send it in, drop it through the mail slot, put a stamp on it. We'll receive them a number of different ways. So we're trying to be as open and as inclusive in that regard as we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from council? Hearing none, we'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item up is has a speaker for it, and this is item 8.5, bylaws 8561, 8562, and 8563, official community plan amendment, rezoning and housing agreement for a mixed-use development at 1310 Monashee Drive. And at this point, I'm going to welcome up here in person Oliver Webb, who's representing Darwin Construction. And I believe, Mr. Webb, you have a PowerPoint presentation on the desktop there.
I do. Thank you very much. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. This up. Gonna help me with slideshow. I wish I was as good at technology as some of you. Here we go. Thanks very much. Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Oliver Webb. I'm the CEO of the Darwin Group of Companies, and we're talking tonight about our project at 1310 Monashee Drive. We're pleased that our Capilano University student, staff, and faculty housing project is presented to council for first reading this evening. This project is 100% rental and within 50 feet of the CapU transit station, offering for the first time an opportunity for some of the 11,600 students or over 1,000 faculty and staff to live on campus. Since the staff report was finalized on May 17th, Darwin and the district staff have worked collaboratively to further refine the proposal to address staff's concerns, which will be briefed on this evening. As you may be aware, the District of North Vancouver does not currently have a student and faculty housing zoning bylaw, so a significant amount of work and research was necessary to finalize our proposal. I understand that housing affordability is a top priority for this council. Therefore, I've prepared a few slides which will confirm without a doubt that this project will be affordable for students, faculty, and staff of the university. So I'd like to refer you to the slides which we've presented, and I would just like to walk it through. So on what we've compared this to is there's only one other facility in the district of North Vancouver which is occupied by students. It's a property that we actually own on Dollarton Highway at 2420 Dollarton Highway. It's university student dormitory housing. In the first column, you can see this is the rental rate that each student would pay for a double occupancy unit. And the size of the unit is 180 square feet. It does not have a kitchen, it does not have a bathroom, does not have a shower. It's traditional campus style housing. The proposed market rents, which have been outlined, I believe, in page 10 of the report, show what the proposed rents are going to be for this project. The range is about $718 to $775 a square foot or per month. The size of the unit is significantly larger. We've got a floor plan of this unit type on the next slide. It's between 359 and 383 square feet, which is why there's a range in the rent. Every unit will have a kitchen, a private bathroom, a private shower, and in-suite laundry. For the proposed non-market rents, that's 10% of the units within this project, the rental rate, which will be $674 a month. That is in line with what the current rents are as of today, but you're getting more amenities, such as a kitchen, private bathroom, shower, and in-suite laundry. I'll come back to this slide in a second, but I want to show you the difference between the types of units that we will be offering. On the left side is the current housing at 2420 Dollarton. There's 2 closets, 2 desks, and that's a shared accommodation of about 180 square feet. In our proposed project, it's about 383 square feet. You'll have a kitchenette, 2 closets, it's in-suite laundry, a bathroom and shower facility. I'm almost done. At the bottom of this page, I want to be very clear. Based on the average income of the faculty and staff, faculty will be able to afford 100% of the units on a single income, and staff will be able to afford 63% of the studios and 1-bedroom units based on a single income. This information is provided directly from the university and from on how much they pay their staff and faculty. We've confirmed that with the university. So I want to just touch on that before we answer any other council questions about this project, that there should not be any question that this project is affordable for the people that we're building it for. Okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Is there, I believe, Kevin Zhang, you're on the line, and I believe Dan Milburn and Yan Zhang as well, I believe. So we do have some staff present for staff presentation.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's Yan Zhang, the Manager of Development Planning. I'll open for Kevin Zhang. So yes, as you see tonight, staff are presenting to Mayor and Council a OCP amendment and rezoning application at this for all rental development. With some CRU at grade at this large site directly adjacent to Capilano University. So unfortunately, staff are not in the position to support the proposal as it's presented in the report. And because in staff's opinion, this is not really adequately addressing the housing needs for the university. And, so tonight you will hear from project planner, Mr. Kevin Zhang, in terms of staff's concern about the project. And I will say even with the last minute housing terms that the applicant proposed put on the table tonight, staff haven't had the opportunity to examine them in detail, but at a high level, we still have those outstanding concerns because in our opinion, it's not addressing the housing needs, not going nearly far enough. So we will present those key comments. We will present the options moving forward for council consideration. And I will say that staff are very keen on working with the applicant to deliver needed housing, much needed housing. And so we wanted to hear directly from council in terms of your direction. So with that, with your permission, I'll pass it on to Mr. Zhang.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Ten. The OCP amendment, rezoning, and housing agreement bylaws in front of council tonight are associated with the mixed-use residential commercial development at 1310 Monashi Drive, which consists of 8,600 square feet of commercial and 315 rental units. As outlined in the report, while all of the rental units are targeted towards CAPU students, faculty, and staff, 50 of which are reserved solely for CAPU students, faculty, and staff, and 32 of which are rented at non-market rates. Staff believe that the implementation of these housing agreements, as set out in the draft housing agreement, is inadequate. On May 27th, last Friday, the applicant provided staff with 5 revisions to their proposal aimed at addressing these shortcomings. As Ms. Zen said, staff have not yet had a chance to review these revisions. To reiterate, as written in the policy section of the report, staff are supportive of housing adjacent to the CAPU campus, and staff are also supportive of rental housing in general, both market and non-market. However, in order to justify an OCP amendment, a rezoning proposal of this magnitude outside of our town and village centers, staff believe there must be 3 key changes to the proposal. First, the rental housing should have stronger ties to CAPU students, faculty, and staff. Second, the rental housing should incorporate greater affordability. And lastly, the community amenity contribution package should be consistent with the district policies in terms of offsetting impacts associated with this development proposal. Given that the recent revisions that are yet to be reviewed, staff are providing a new recommendation to council tonight that is a modified version of option 4 from the report. The staff's recommendation tonight is, quote, that the proposal is referred back to staff for further discussion with the applicant with the following list of specific directions from staff, end quote. That concludes my presentation, and we look forward to council's discussion on this topic and welcome any specific directions to staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be moving the modified option 4 staff recommendation as outlined by Kevin Zhang. Is there a seconder on that matter? I've got Councillor Back as a seconder on the matter. Just some comments on this. I mean, we all want to see effective and affordable rental housing in this space that supports the university. This would be, but it's critically important that this be protected in perpetuity as much as reasonably practicable. I think Capilano University has gone after about an 80% target of in perpetuity on other projects that they've worked for. For comparison, this one actually only protects about 16% of the units in perpetuity for staff, student, or faculty use. It gives a preferential option at the very front end that there's going to be a period of time that staff, student, and faculty would have an advanced opportunity to get it. But as the years go by on the project, as other people move in when wait lists are down, which they typically will be down from February forward into the summer, then they would be filled in by non-staff, student, or faculty spaces, and would there may be an opportunity when those units turn over to be able to put staff, student, or faculty back into them. But at the end of the day, the only units that are actually protected in perpetuity are about the 50 units that are identified in the plan, which is about 16% of the units. I think we need to push for a higher standard of protection in perpetuity for this benefit to the community and specifically this benefit to the university. And also there is the issue outlined in the report about, the municipality's policy is to try to extract about 75% of the uplift on a property. This one is moving from a PRO designation up to a fairly modest density. And staff have identified in the report that that the current proposal does not account for that kind of uplift and CAC back to the community's benefit. So at this point, I'm going to be supporting option 4. I probably would have actually been supportive of option 1 tonight, unfortunately, which is rejection. But I do recognize that the applicant is trying to improve the project and has recently made some amendments as of recently as Friday. So I would like staff an opportunity and perhaps the applicant an opportunity to go back and see if the pencil can be sharpened or if this just simply is a delta that can't be crossed. But for me, I wanted to see the entire project be staff, student, and faculty if possible. But I think that the university's goal of protecting 80% of it for university purposes is a reasonable goal. And it's a goal that also has the support of the student union as well. And so I will be supporting option 4 tonight. Councillor Back, your comments.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Much along the lines of your comments, I tend to agree. I do support housing in this location. I supported it when it came as an early input over 2 years ago. I just feel it does have to have the greatest benefit to the university over the course of as long as that housing is there. And I just don't feel like this proposal is quite there yet. And that's why I think, taking this back and just kind of buttoning down those housing agreements in particular, I think need to be buttoned down. I think having last minute changes as recent as last week is a little bit concerning for me when the biggest component of this is the affordability for the student and faculty community there. So I'd like to have seen that a little bit more detailed and, as I say, kind of buttoned down. I do support, as I say, housing in this location. And I think, the commercial space will certainly be a benefit to the university community up there. Having some services and some vibrancy that will come with that will be, a really great addition to the university. So I don't want to see this go back and take another over 2 years. I just think it's got to go back to staff and go through the proper process of just kind of buttoning down the details of those housing agreements. But we need more rental housing. Capilano University it's been part of their plans for a very long time. We were very supportive of the student housing just across from this site, which is true student housing. But I think this has the potential to be that as well. It just needs a little bit more detail, I think, than we have here tonight.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I begin my remarks by disclosing that Oliver Webb made a very generous donation to my federal election campaign. Notwithstanding that, I don't believe I'm in a conflict, and I'm happy to participate in this discussion and any votes that follow. My comments are very much along the lines of Mayor Little and Councillor Back. I support this category of housing in this location. I'm imagining that the deferral is going to lead to a successful negotiation between staff and the applicant that will bring this back before us in a manner that we will be pleased to support. I do believe that it is important that the housing agreement effectively give priority to CAPU students, faculty, and staff, and I respect the fact that our staff feels that further work needs to be done. With respect to that, without getting into the details, I understand that the staff and the applicant plan to have further discussions as to the terms of these housing agreements and also the community amenity contribution. So like Councillor Back, I'm hoping this comes back soon and so that we can get on with this very important initiative. And I thank all parties involved for bringing it forward to this stage. Thank you.
Very much. Next speaker I have is Councillor Murray, followed by Councillor Bowen. Councillor Murray.
Could I just ask if there's been any work done in regards to the viability of the site, given that it sits on the Seymour Valley Escarpment, just above a residential area. So has any work been done in regards to that area, given our experience on slides in the past?
Well, the applicant has a response to that, but I just want to check in, do staff have a response on that question of the geotechnical analysis of the property?
Hi there. Through your worship, yes, the applicant has submitted a geotechnical investigation report by Geopacific Consultants. As a result of the recommendations of the report, they have set back any development on the property a total of 33.5 meters or 110 feet away from their eastern property line.
Thank you. I concur as well with the comments of the mayor, and I think that was the problem from the very beginning. Council was very clear that if this was going to be student housing or student and faculty housing, it needed to remain such in perpetuity. And you know, it's several hundred units, and really only 50 are protected to an extent. My daughter is going into second year at Cap University, and she got out mid-April, and will not return to the university until September. The 10th of September, I think, is the day they return. And that's a pretty long amount of time. And I believe that there was a clause within the agreement that, if there was an empty unit, it could be re-rented out. And not necessarily to a student. And you're going to erode the very thing you're trying to create very quickly under those guidelines. As really, I mean, university housing is, first year, let's check out what it's like to live in a university and be away from home, and then often it changes. The university students don't go back the second year to campus housing. And, I guess the affordability factor as well, how can we guess what market rates will be in the future? So the below market concept, what happens when two bedrooms are $5,000 a month. In many cases throughout the region, they are that much. So below market doesn't necessarily mean it's affordable. And I think that's where, if we're trying to create housing for students, like Cap University, we had a successful rezoning application with them. Because the housing that they are building is in perpetuity. It is for students, and it will remain for students going forward. Like other campuses, the traditional model of housing on campuses, it doesn't change. If you're not there, it just remains, and that's why it's successful. Like everything, it's expensive to live, and certainly expensive for local students and students that are coming, internationally. So we need to make sure that this is protected at all costs and does not erode under any circumstances. Otherwise, it cannot be supportable. And I won't support it unless it is maintained, and well over 50 units as well. I mean, I find this number to be, compared to the overall total number of the project, it's a minute amount, for a need that's great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. I have Councillors Bond and Kern. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and similar to Councillor Hanson, at this point, I'd like to disclose that Oliver Webb did make a $1,200 contribution in the 2018 election to the Building Bridges Electoral Society, which endorsed one mayoral candidate and 4 council candidates, one of which was me. I have a few comments on this. I think what my colleagues have said all makes sense, and I agree with a lot of it. I think at this location, there's a lot of really good things that are in the application. Rental housing specifically targeted for students and staff at Capilano University makes sense. I think we all know that the rental market in North Vancouver is dire for anyone that's renting. Market rents for existing older or even new apartments are far higher than what's proposed in this proposal. I have a few specific questions for staff, should this come back during this term of council. I would like to see a comparison. Obviously, the applicant has provided a comparison of the student housing costs at the other facility in the district. I'd like to see a comparison to the adjacent facility. I know council recently approved the development permit for the on-campus housing for Capilano University. So I think that would be a valuable comparison to make in terms of the cost and the affordability of this proposal. I think it's important also to remember that if students aren't living here on campus, they're paying market rent somewhere else. And so there's definitely a benefit. Students across North Van are living in shared accommodation or basement suites with roommates, and the costs here don't seem out of line for what a lot of students and young people are paying across the district. Or and if they're not living in the district, then they're often, I think we've heard from the Capilano Unit Student Society that people are commuting an hour and a half on transit, whether they're to find more affordable accommodation. The second question I have, I note in the staff report, again, there's a lot of supportive comments. The one comment about the community amenity contribution being significant room in that for a higher contribution. I'd like staff to explain, we know how to value the land lift for market strata. We know how to value the potential land lift for market rental. How do you value the land lift attributed to rezoning when council is placing a restrictive? It's not in the covenant's wrong word, but placing a restriction that a higher amount of the rental homes proposed here be dedicated to the university. In my mind, that potentially reduces the viability and the rents achievable, and therefore the value of the land lift. So where is the balancing point on how staff are going to evaluate how much land lift is there? Say if council agrees to 80 or 90% being the number that we want for restricted to on-campus housing, and that means that the rental homes are only rented 8 months of the year. So I'm not sure if staff are prepared to provide a response to that now, but I think that's important for council to consider in weighing how much we want to preserve this rental housing versus how much CAC we expect from this proposal.
I believe staff have contemplated that, and Mr. Milburn has a response.
Thank you, Worship, and we can provide further details coming back to council should council approve option 4 tonight. But in a general sense, we absolutely do account for any kind of reduced rent that can be achieved in the non-market units, as well as the limited market. If the units are specific to students, faculty, and staff, this will have an impact on the revenue generating potential. It doesn't mean there is no revenue though. And so what we do is we look to our third-party consultant who provides us with land economic advice, and in fact provides municipalities with advice all across the metro region. And they're familiar with various forms of housing and various rental rates, and give us an indication of the kind of impact that can have. And it can be significant, but the kind of impact that can have on the community amenity contribution amount. And council will note that in a number of cases, in applications where there is a close connection between the existing zoning and the zoning proposed, there might be very little lift in that case. And in those cases, the units themselves absorb any kind of CAC lift. In this case, we are dealing with an existing PRO and park property, and which has a withholding motion still on it, so a limited subset of uses to a 315 units of rental housing. So there is lift, and the opportunity here is to talk about both the numbers of units, the affordability of the units, and then if there is money left over, a CAC cash contribution that can be committed to whatever council feels appropriate under the policy, which often includes, of course, further housing, which might be located in the area. So long-winded answer, we absolutely do account for that potential impact on the units and how much they contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm supportive of option 4. I do note that this type of housing in this location is supported by Capilano University. And so if there's a way that the applicant and staff can go back together to sort out these issues that staff have with the current application, then I'd be supportive of that.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillors Curran and Forbes. Councillor Curran, your comments.
Thank you. I think most folks have kind of already said what needs to be said. I'll just add that, Capilano, the university, as well as Capilano Student Union is supportive, as am I supportive of student and faculty housing and this purpose-built rental. I think they were, the union in particular was excited about the mixed use potential and having some amenities that are not actually currently there. And they did outline their concerns. And so it's in the report, the letter that they sent. And so just recognizing, I did think it was, notable that they say, given the affordability crisis and the unique ways in which the crisis impacts students, additional work is needed to ensure that the rents will be affordable for Capilano University. The current interpretations of below market rental on the North Shore remain out of students' reach. We are often relying on student loans and minimum wage jobs to fund education, and leaving below market doesn't address all of their concerns. So I think that is important, and that's something that they often talk about. The student union is that they're working minimum wage jobs and they have loans, and so it's very challenging. So I think that's not likely to change in the current economic system that we're living in. So I think that having these extend into the future for future affordability is going to be important. And they just wanted some greater assurance that the students would be prioritized in this project. And so I am also supportive of 4. I also understand the urgency around creating some of this housing, so would encourage staff. I know they just got new information on Friday and haven't had a chance to review it yet, but after tonight you'll hear it sounds like council is largely supportive of this project, but needs to iron out some of the details as well. So I look forward to it coming back as soon as it can. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, your comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. Most of the things I was going to say have been said, and that has to do with the affordability, the amount of that's reserved for faculty and staff and students. My number one concern is that this is supposed to be a university housing. And so I want to see as much of it as possible, if not all of it, like you mentioned, your mayor, going towards that. I have real concerns about the things that are laid out with the housing agreement. Such as if there's 10 vacancies over a 2-month period, then it can go out again. And just how universities work when there's full complement of students and staff. So I think there's a lot of points, as everybody said, that needs to be worked out in that housing agreement. I do have a question for staff, and maybe I've missed it. I don't think so, but I know that Darwin it said in the report that Darwin Properties is representing the owner. Who is the owner of this land?
I think it's an option that you have in place in an agreement with the owner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so should the zoning proceed, then Darwin would become the owner of the land.
Okay, thank you. I do notice also nobody's mentioned the comments from the public meeting that was held last year, and there's comments in there. There seems to be quite a few people who sort of live below that escarpment that are concerned about their safety. So I'm glad that we have a geotechnical report that will assure the district that there's safety in building there. They also talk about traffic, which is our problem all over the district, but they talk about traffic. And then I was looking at the amount of parking that's allowed. And I know that probably university students will probably bike more than people not in university. So maybe there isn't as much of a need for the parking. The other point that I just wanted to make was that it needs to be in perpetuity. And I, like Councillor Murray, wouldn't support anything if we don't get more support for the students and the staff. And the affordability is a student union concern as well, and also the guarantee of what amount of housing will be available to them. So those are my concerns. Those are their concerns, but I know that we need more student housing there. So I'm willing to go with number 4 and let it go back to staff because there's been late minute changes here that maybe we're not all taking in, and let the applicant and the staff work that out a little further and then bring it back to council and see what happens then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Curran, second time speaker.
Thanks. I just forgot to mention, since students sometimes leave their rentals for the summer months, I am embarking on an adventure to UBC where I'm staying in a dorm for $60 a night for a conference. And I just thought that was really interesting model to let other folks potentially, so I didn't see anything like that in the report, but we certainly have a shortage of, I want to start a climate corp. So of course, you know, we need a place to put the students, but if they're not in the climate corp, they could be, you know, visiting, and that would be a great place to stay, and it could multi-solve for some of the challenges that we have. And also just in terms of the mobility, yeah, it would be great in this place to do something innovative. There are many students that do not own private vehicles, car share, and other ways to move around. I think that's a great location for some things that wouldn't always work in other locations. But I just wanted to put that out there because I'm curious what other ideas might come up for the time that those units aren't occupied, how we can use those to support whoever needs them. Just would like to hear some ideas from staff and the applicant maybe when it comes back.
Great, thank you. And good for you, Councillor Curran. My son had a swim meet at Thompson Rivers University, and I stayed in dorm housing for one night.
Hey, $60 for a single room, shared bathroom, pretty sweet deal, I thought. Anyway, otherwise it's 3 hours on transit every day, just hour and a half each way. So
great, thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sorry, there was a couple of questions that I wanted to ask or points I wanted to make. I also want to make sure that I wanted to ask what the level of charging ability for e-bikes would be if it was level 1 or level 2. I think level 2 is required now, so that's probably the answer staff would answer back. And the other thing I just wanted to make a comment about was, because it's a new building and you always want to ask for more if you can, I just like some consideration instead of having electrical baseboard, because I know electrical baseboard is very expensive. And so again, I'm thinking for the students and costs, that if we couldn't make the entire building heat pump type of heating, or a different type of heating than electrical, because that's an extremely expensive form of heating. My son lives up north, and yes, he gets very cold temperatures, but his electrical bill when he first moved in and didn't have the gas hooked up was just insane. So I just like to have a look at different ways that we might be able to do that. I'm also interested in if we can go farther than step 3 and what level of charging and how much charging for e-bikes. Thank you.
We have a comment from staff about electric car parking and charging and e-bike charging capability. Perhaps Mr. Milburn, if you don't have the details, I can go to the applicant, or Mr. Zhang.
Your Worship, we've heard those questions. Should Council approve option 4, we'll come back with answers with those specific questions raised by Councillor Forbes.
That's fair. Okay, Council, I see no further speakers on the matter. Prepared to call the question. Oh, I did want to make sure that Mr. Joyce, who's the acting CAO tonight, had an opportunity to sum up the matter as he's heard it. Mr. Joyce?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have been working here. I think we have 5 points as we listen to Council's consideration tonight. The first, that the amount of guaranteed units for students, faculty, and staff be increased significantly to reflect the intended purpose to faculty and staff. Second, that the CAC be reviewed with a mind to achieving the mitigation anticipated in the CAC policy. Third, that the affordability of the units be in line with the income of students, faculty, and staff. Fourth, that the affordability of this proposal be compared to other student housing. And fifth, that we review the subletting rules to support students, faculty, and staff. And further to Councillor Forbes' comment, you'll also provide some commentary on e-bikes, and that will come back in a staff report.
Does that include the perpetuity, the issue of perpetuity, that the units remain in perpetuity, Mr. Joyce?
Through your worship, we heard that from several councillors. We'll make comment on that in the staff report as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you. Okay, the next item up for discussion is item 8.6. This is the tree protection policy and forest health update. At this time, I believe Mr. Bose. Oh, yes.
Did we have a speaker on 8.5?
Mr. Webb.
Oh, I thought it was from the public. Okay, thank you.
In this context, the public, yes, it was a public speaker. Mr. Bose, or sorry, Mr. Joyce, I see your hand up. Did you want to have opening comments before Mr. Bose?
I do not, your worship. My hand's going down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bose. Welcome. Looking forward to your report.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to provide a very brief verbal introduction to the items that are in the package, and then we'll look forward to questions and/or discussion. So leading up to the information in the package that we presented, the proposed tree protection bylaw changes, the draft report on our forest resiliency strategy. These documents have been under discussion with our fire chief and the park staff, our climate change office for some months now. We've had a fairly good and consistent meeting and internal forest working group committee that consists of the fire chief, our parks manager, our climate action office manager, and myself and our community foresters. So we've been meeting on these forest related issues for months, if not years, between some of us. So there's been a lot of collaboration going on and leading up into this. So I want to thank all of them for their input on the work that you're seeing in front of you tonight. So there was a little bit of lead up that I want to just briefly touch on. A lot of the material you're seeing tonight stems from a November 2021 council workshop in which we discussed many of the issues around trees and tree protection within our community. And so what we are seeing tonight are items that were discussed at that council workshop, and staff received direction to come forward with the changes that we're seeing tonight. So in regards to the bylaw changes that we're seeing, we are proposing to amend the tree protection bylaw mainly around the category called a large diameter tree. These are large 75 centimeter and over trees on private property that are not otherwise in any other protected area categories, i.e. a steep slope, a stream protection area, things like that. They are private and large trees. We're also undertaking, you know, at last is a language and terminology update. The tree bylaw was needed to bring a lot of the definitions and terms used in alignment with policy adopted after the tree bylaw, and as well as industry standards and practice. There have been new definitions and terms being used, so we've updated a lot of the language in the bylaw to make it current. We have adjusted our fees, and accordingly, we've needed to propose amendments to the fees and charges and the bylaw notice enforcement amended. I want to touch briefly on some of the items that we discussed in November 2021 that we're not bringing forward tonight. At the council workshop in 2021, council had asked us to look at ideas and concepts for an incentive program to encourage private property owners of trees to retain these trees through some kind of incentive program. It's a very complex idea. Staff have done a little bit of work on that, but what we've done to date is really look at what kind of incentives are out there, and there are many. from financial incentives to land use credit type of incentives. So we need more work on that. We have spent considerably more time, and we're fairly close to being able to bring forward a hazard tree subsidy grant program. And recall that this was discussed at length at the council workshop, where we identified the current approach where staff review permits for hazard trees and issue permits at no charge for permit fees, as well as no replacement trees for hazard tree removals. So one of the things we had discussed is whether or not there would be support for a subsidy program by which we would use our revenue account to offer a grant to a homeowner that's undertaking the removal of hazard trees that meet certain criteria. Staff liked this idea because in return, we would still offer a no fee permit, but by offering the grant, we'd be able to require the planting of replacement trees back on the property. So we would in essence be getting some of our urban tree canopy replacement back through this program. The third thing we're going to talk on, and included in the package, is the draft version of the report titled the Forest Resiliency Strategy. It's a fairly lengthy report. We initiated this in 2019 after completion of our updated community wildfire plan. It's a key foundational piece to the district's climate change adaptation strategy. And then the moment we started this very important piece of work, we decided that it would be prudent to include some further work on post-fire recovery mechanisms, as well as some hydrological impact assessments, because the resilience strategy for our forest should be a long forward-looking document that takes into account the issues around what kind of risks would be introduced as a result of a fire. So that's where we commissioned some extra work, and we had that done, and that's incorporated into the current version of the report. Then fast forward to 2021, we had the looper moth infestation, and then last year the heat dome. So we've decided to incorporate that work into our report as well. That work is not included, as the field work to determine sort of tree and forest health issues as related to the moth and the heat dome are ongoing this summer. As new forest buds come out, we need that forest activity for our consultant team to go into the forest and give us an idea of what kind of forest damage we're looking at as a result of the moth and the heat dome. That work will be included or completed this summer, and then the material will be wrapped up into the forest resilience strategy in the fall of 2022, and at which time we'll expect to bring a full report back to council to begin the fairly detailed and probably very complex discussion around what's our long-term forest management strategy going to be, and what the detailed plans would look like. So that is the background that I've put together for council, and I'm here at council and your direction and/or for questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Bose. Council, looking to you for direction on this matter. I see Councillor Forbes has your you have your hand up. Do you have a motion?
I'll move the motion.
Okay, is the seconder? I see Councillor Murray.
I'll second it.
Okay, your comments, Councillor Forbes.
I want to thank you for the report. It is very detailed as it is already, and it must have been an awful lot of work to put it together. Do you have a timeline on the, I mean, I like that we have a little bit stronger stick to cover off some things like lots being clear cut and things like that, but do you have any timeline on the incentives program? Do you have any idea when a report might come back on that to council?
Your worship, Councillor Forbes, as mentioned, we are very close, and I would expect to have a subsidy program in front of council when we get the forest resilience strategy back. So that would be one mechanism in which we would be able to put trees back into the urban canopy network. So once we get a number of things kind of taken care of and out of the way, we can try to have a draft program ready, likely, hopefully, when we come back with the extra data that we're going to put into the forest resiliency strategy. And I would commit to working extremely hard to put at least the framework of a private property incentive program in front of council at that same time, if we can manage. So that would be, you know, hopefully toward the end of summer, early fall, this coming year, we could likely have something in front of council.
Okay, that would be really good. There was something else I was going to mention. I can't think of it right now. I've got all kinds of notes here, but I'll let the next person speak because I've lost my train of thought on it. Thank you. Very good report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Muir, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Yeah, I think the incentive program is really sort of the ticket to, you know, give options to be or encouragement to keep some of these big stands. You know, our hazard trees obviously have gone up in abundance this year. Last year, and I know that just a call to have a hazard tree looked at. I know there's a long lineup. I know the queue is long, and there's a number of them out there, and it's a challenging time for our arborists and our environmental department in regards to the impact that our forests have had to take over the last few years. So you know, I guess you know, I can't help but go back to the zoning bylaw, and I know we've talked about, you know, taking a look at it and reviewing it, but, you know, the ability for basements to be excluded from the overall square footage for speculative development, particularly, I mean, increasing the fines is just a part of doing business. And when we're cutting lot line to lot line, you know, displacing the water table with the type of foundations that we're allowing in the municipality, and taking what once was, you know, in many cases, you know, a forested neighborhood. You know, I sit on the Metro Parks Committee, and we recently had a presentation about the cooling effects of, you know, these neighborhoods. And there was a heat map that was put up on the screen by the presenter, and I'll get a copy of the presentation actually. But on the eastern side of the city of Vancouver, you know, it was quite a hot red area throughout the summer months, and on the west side of the city of Vancouver, it was more blue and green because of those mature neighborhoods with those mature trees in them. They've provided cooling through those heat domes, whereas areas that have been, you know, redeveloped and more cement, et cetera, more density, there is a real issue with the ability to cool. So you know, losing the canopy is a challenge, and we really have to make sure that we protect it as best we can. So, you know, for those, I also like the Mr. Bowes, the discussion in regards to the hazard tree and allowing us to have some sort of a grant that we can give back to the resident for looking at these challenging trees if they're going to deal with them. I'm not even sure if we have enough resources anymore to deal, you know, not necessarily ourselves as a municipality, but enough companies around. You know, they're working sort of 24/7 right now, I think. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration because they can't work at night. But I know that they're very, very busy. And so, you know, looking at some way for us to have the homeowner deal with it, I'm sure is going to, you know, alleviate the challenge to a certain extent. I think the incentive program is really something that is going to be very, very interesting, and you know, it's supportive in regards to protecting more of the canopy than we've done in the past.
Great. Just my own comments on the matter. I'm really mixed on this one because I certainly hear the concerns expressed by Mr. Teven at the front of the meeting about it, and I I think that our community does need to look through an emergency management lens when we're talking about our forested areas. And I don't believe that we, in doing this, will necessarily be improving the resiliency of our community towards wildfire. And it's something I'm very concerned about. And anybody who is seeing the direction that our weather patterns are going has to come to the inescapable conclusion that we're going to have a catastrophic fire on the North Shore at some point, whether it's an errant cigarette or whether it's a dry lightning event, we're going to have a fire. And so when that fire happens, would you rather have defensible space around your housing neighborhoods, or would you rather have them intermixed with the forest? And I think that, you know, I look at the city of Whistler, sorry, the resort municipality of Whistler. I know that they, up until 2018, their community was very much every tree is sacred. And then they had a fire approach the village. And all of a sudden the mood shifted entirely. And the municipality, the public, all changed and said they wanted to be a fire smart communities and acknowledge fire smart neighborhoods. And some of those things to become a fire smart community involve non-combustible materials, which the district already recognizes through our wildfire hazard DP process, but also making sure that we have defensible space in and around our structures, because the biggest risk of a forest fire is a house fire spreading to the forest, and the biggest risk of a house fire in those circumstances is not having enough defensible space between the forest and houses. I recognize that this program isn't specifically dealing with this, but it is making it harder to remove trees close to structures. And I think when we get to the point that the community is ready to look at fire smart, that you're going to realize those are the biggest risks to your community. There are very few communities around the Lower Mainland that have followed the fire smart route, but almost everywhere that's been impacted by the fires in the interior of BC, you see the municipalities are becoming fire smart communities. We have had some recognition here at a neighborhood level for the work that the people at Sunshine and Woodlands, when they became sort of a neighborhood of a fire smart neighborhood, but not at the municipal level. West Vancouver received an award from Fire Smart for their community planning process, but again, they are not a fire smart community yet. We're all going to have to address this issue at some point in our community, and the policies that we have now will affect our ability to pivot at that time and be able to respond. So I have concerns that this is a missed opportunity. It doesn't help us address that issue. And I also just wanted to make a quick comment about the fees. So when there's really two different competing philosophies on fees. You can use fees as a vice fee in order to be able to stop something that you don't want to happen. So you jack the fee up to the point that nobody in their right mind would want to become subject to the fee, and they stop the behavior that you're trying to affect. And the other fee strategy is revenue, where you're going out and you're saying, what do we need to do to maximize the revenue from this behavior that's happening in the community? We want to be able to compensate the community for this. We're not really doing either with these fees. And the risk that we have is that the district actually makes a fair amount of revenue from the current fee that comes back as foregone fees. Basically, someone agrees they buy a property, they get into an agreement with the staff that they're going to replace trees on the property, they never replace the trees, and the fee comes back to the municipality. And the problem is, the more you jack the fee up, the more likely it is that somebody's going to just plant the 3 replacement trees, which can be really tiny trees. And so then you end up in a situation where the revenue drops off a cliff, because it is more advantageous for them to just plant some saplings than it is for them to pay the fee. And so the higher we make the fee, the more likely we make it that people will take the alternative, which is to plant replacement trees. And so we may actually lose the ability to create this fund that could strategically help us replace trees in areas that are more in need, and specific with more cedars in certain environments and firs in other environments. So I don't know that we're really hitting the fee side of it accurately, and I'm also concerned that it is not stepping us towards being a fire smart community. But I do recognize that there is enough flexibility and options built into this proposal that people still get to choose how they want to respond. And I'm supportive of that. And there's a lot of really good stuff embedded in this as well as far as overall forest health in the community. So I'm going to be supportive, but I really do think that our municipality needs to pursue the Fire Smart program. It'll be too late to pursue it when we have the dry lightning event, and it will be devastating. But I'll be supportive of this at this time. The next speaker I have is, sorry, I have a response from Mr. Bose and Mr. Milburn. I attracted a response. Good.
Just quickly, Your Worship, without going into a detailed response to all the comments made, I just wanted to assure Council from the, I think the speaker at the beginning of the night from the public, as well as yourself, in raising those concerns. And I think it's a very good point that there are multiple objectives trying to be achieved in this report ultimately when it comes back to Council for approval, Fire Smart being one of those key elements. And we have and will continue to engage closely, in fact, co-writing the report with the District North Vancouver Fire Rescue Services to ensure it reflects best practices in terms of Fire Smart and fire prevention, because that's a key element of managing the forest to ensure that we're protected. So all excellent points raised, and staff are taking note. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bose, you have further comments?
Mayor Little, both Councillor Forbes and Councillor Murray mentioned the incentive program. So I wanted to just let everyone know that we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for the incentive program when we initiated our urban forest canopy project last year, which was the very first year of this program. And what we had done is we've established an inventory database by which homeowners taking part in the program have registered themselves. And so in effect, what we've done is we've set ourselves up to take care of the administrative tasks of keeping and looking at a tree in terms of an asset on property. So, you know, we've gotten the records, we know where the trees are, we know what kind of tree is planted and things like that. So what we really just need to do is figure out which kind of tree or which kind of incentive we want to apply to that, and the administrative piece is nicely there. And then in regards to the revenue, again, last year was our very first year of wholesale expenditure using the compensation revenue account. So we fully anticipate expenditures to grow substantially with the use of that account, especially as we begin to introduce new and more programs designed to put trees back on our single family property base to begin replacing some of those lost services.
Very much. Councillors Kern and Hanson. Councillor Kern, your comments.
Thank you to staff for all the work, and understand that it is a work in progress and there's more work forthcoming on this, but I will support what's being recommended in terms of the tree bylaw. I mean, I think one of the most important parts around this is education around all of the multiple benefits that healthy trees have and healthy biodiversity in order to keep healthy trees. And I think that it's not something that people necessarily understand, that when a large diameter healthy tree is removed, that was able to absorb up to 70% of rainwater, that without it, it needs to go into the storm drains. And then it's the sort of spatial temporal things that we don't always think of. So I do think this is important, but it's only one piece of it is at the end. The bigger piece is around how do you build resilience and also knowledge of how all of the systems that we live in are relational. So the health of that tree is connected to the health of other things. So I think there's more work to be done, but I did want staff maybe to comment on, or something that I think might be helpful. When I look at the second piece, which I sort of saw as a framework for the principles that will inform the long-term health of our forests and help to define the actions and the indicators that we'll use to see how is the health of our forest. I was thinking about the biodiversity strategy that's underway, the integrated stormwater management work around that we do with Nasim, the climate change adaptation strategy, potential municipal natural asset initiative. So maybe when staff comes back, it would be nice to sort of see a visual of how all of these different strategies nest together, because I think there's a lot of interconnectivity, of course, with that. And I just really wanted to, I think that education piece, which is so important, was staff's doing some great work around that with the tree canopy project. I've talked to lots of folks that were really excited and kind of learned more about the tree in terms of all of the ways that it helps keep us all healthy and happy, and keeping the forest, the natural area healthy is going to require unprecedented action on our end over the coming decades. So I think that is really important, but just kind of how all these things nest together would be nice. I know the biodiversity strategy is underway, and I know we're doing a lot of great work. So I'm excited about that to see how it all progresses. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next speaker is Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you to staff for preparing the report, and in particular for the extensive work that was put into the forest resilience strategy report, a very detailed document. I read it with Karen, was greatly in respect of the amount of work that had been put in and the amount of detail. Look forward to further discussion and analysis of that aspect of our tree discussions. Specifically dealing with the motion on the floor, I do support the bylaw amendments. I think they're on the right track in terms of tree retention. I also would support the incentive program for tree retention, and I look forward to learning more details about that. And I thank staff for the work that is being done in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'll echo the comments to thanking staff. This is an excellent report. There's a lot of detail in here, and I know one of the few topics that comes before council that is always contentious and hard to find a middle practical ground is trees. And I know one of the challenges we've mentioned in previous workshops, especially around managing trees on private land, is that we have very few regulatory tools to actually achieve some of the outcomes that initiated a lot of this work that was done. I remember a lot of this work that we've done with the tree bylaw changes was, as staff mentioned, as other councillors had mentioned, was around large diameter trees, particularly being removed through single family redevelopment, or individual owners choosing to remove a long-standing lone large diameter tree on their property, and the community feedback and impact of that. That's not something that we can prohibit. So I'm interested to see this incentive, how this incentive program will work. I think I'll probably need a little bit more presentation and convincing with staff to see how managing trees on private property is an effective and that we can be effective for doing that. I tend to think that the more that the district takes on managing both the health of our urban forests on our own properties, which we have total control over, and in our forested areas on the mountainside, the more work that we do on that front to promote our urban tree canopy, and through that process educating the public, I think that's really that's kind of where we're going to have a lot of effective outcomes from doing this. So I'm pleased to see the report and the difference between mentioning how we manage our urban forests and our urban tree canopy, and how we manage our remote or mountainside forests have different approaches. I think it would be interesting to understand more about the role of large diameter, whether they're single trees or small groupings of trees, and how that works and promotes ecosystem health in an urban context. I know a lot of different jurisdictions can achieve an urban tree canopy in a different way, using different species. And so how we promote our ecosystem health, I'm interested to learn more about that, and perhaps that comes in a future workshop as part of the urban, the forest resilience strategy. I also know that looking at the fees and the charges, my understanding was that we're trying to increase the fees and charges for one purpose, is to act as a deterrent towards property owners removing large diameter trees. Now, there can be occurrences where that's done as part of a development, which is seen to be a negative impact, but there's probably an equal number of people in the district that are property owners that would like to remove a large diameter tree to improve their property. Maybe their lot has small access to sun, and that's an important mental health benefit. I think we've all heard those perspectives before on council. So I'm a little bit skeptical about the changes and the increase in fees, because while they may act as a deterrent, they also act as an additional cost for any resident that has a legitimate reason to remove a tree on their property. But given that we have done a lot of work, and it does seem generally supported by members of the public and council, will be supporting this bylaw as we move forward. And really interested to see the next stage of the work in terms of the strategy and the planning as we look into forest resilience.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of quick questions I forgot. We have currently we're trying to maintain a minimum of 20% canopy on lots, and I'm just wondering, this is maybe a bit of a strange way to phrase it, but do we have a maximum? Because large trees on a private lot, you may have a lot that is fully covered with a lot of large trees, and it may be the neighbor that's worried about the wildfire accessibility or danger of their neighbor's lot. Do we have anything that sort of where we review what the total canopy is, and we have sort of a preference as to, I mean, are we going to get to the point where people can't have 50 trees on their lot if they want, but they need to have a 20% minimum?
Mr. Bose?
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, there's no set limits really at all in regards to canopy cover on private property. The 20% target number came out of a very extensive research project that the district initiated some time ago, where we measured the rainfall capture of these large urban trees in our environment. And using that research data, we determined that a 20% tree canopy coverage on a single family lot would be sufficient in which to perform specifically rainwater capture and hydrological benefits to properties that would help with our watershed health objectives. So that's how that number came about. But no, there's no maximum and there's no real minimum. It's keeping in mind too that if a homeowner maintains a 20% canopy after removal of permitted trees, they don't have any kind of replacement tree requirements.
Mr. Milburn, you also have a comment?
Thanks, Worship. Just to add to that question about maximum number of trees, certainly within our wildfire development permit area, there are various issues such as the building envelope itself, the access to the property, the servicing conduit to the property, and of course, creating that defensible space the mayor mentions are all sort of limits on the maximum you could put on a site to ensure it was safe. And that's in particular in our wildfire interface areas where the development permit area applies. So in a sense, there are of course constraints, right, to maximizing the amount of trees that could be placed on our property, and we recognize that.
Thank you. Another question I had was, has there been any consideration, because we all realize that, you know, if you take a large tree down and you replace it with 3 or you replace it with 4, it's going to take 50 years before you get anything close to if it was a very large tree. Has there been any consideration about maybe instead of the max, instead of 3 or 4, have 1 or 2, but they're larger?
Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, we've touched on this briefly, and it is our long and troubling historical past in trying to plant larger trees. As we know, our summers get warmer, drier. We go longer periods without rain. The larger the tree you attempt to transplant from a nursery, the greater risk of that tree not surviving. And so in literally planting thousands of trees in our, with our Parks Department, with our utilities group, when we do project work, we have landed on this spot where it's the way it is now, that these 1.8 meter tall fir and cedar trees are the best trees that seem to survive transplant and grow, and then get to a point where they're self-maintaining quicker.
Thank you. That makes sense. And you very nicely led into my last comment. When you look at its incentives, I mean, given, we've had to cut back on watering and lawns and things like that, and that's going to become probably even more severe going forward. Maybe in the incentive thing, is there any thought given to incentivizing hardscaping rather than everybody trying to water their lawn?
Well,
it would be nice if we could do that.
So again, Your Worship, Councillor Forbes, it's a very complex issue, because are we incentivizing the tree itself, or are we trying to incentivize all the ecosystem services that these big and healthy trees provide? And so do we create a program where we would incentivize an owner for keeping a big, large tree? But then what if an owner can't have a big tree, but chooses to effect a beautiful rainwater retention rain garden on their lot, which provides much of the same kind of service? How do we treat them? And so it's a little bit of insight into how complex this issue is, but we'll bring back lots of ideas, and I'm sure we'll be ready for some great discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your answers.
Thank you. I have further comments from Councillors Curran and Bond. Councillor Curran, your comments.
Thank you. I just wondered, since a lot of what residents probably consider the North Shore Mountains is actually under jurisdiction of Metro Vancouver, specifically around the watersheds, and how do we work together? And this sort of elevated work that we've been doing based on these recent events in particular. I mean, there's been longstanding work happening, but specifically around the compounding impacts of these events. So you get drought coupled with the heat dome coupled with the looper moth. So it's like the compounding event of all of these or the compounding effect of all of these events. And I'm just wondering, are they doing new work at the same level of urgency as we are? And how does the district work with Metro on areas that overlap?
Your Worship, Councillor Curran, it's a good question. So for starters, I'm sure Council can feel quite good about the fact that we've started our interagency collaborative efforts in 2004, when through Council motion we initiated our community wildfire program after the tragic and significant events in the interior in 2003, Kelowna in particular. So since 2004, we have established an sort of agency liaison program that consists of the fire chiefs of our 3 municipalities, Metro Vancouver's watershed operations staff, their forestry people, all of the municipalities, the provincial government staff, and they meet regularly to discuss new trends, technology, management plans, and all of that on all the issues you mentioned, Councillor Curran, and probably many, many more. So we're definitely plugged into what is happening and what is going on. We work very cooperatively with Metro on their tree removal and their forest management in these very sort of visible public areas of their parks. Lynn Headwaters, for example, demonstration forest. I have to say that the parks staff and the watershed staff at Metro have been really good in following through with their permitting requirements with us. We've established great working relationships, and so we are in touch with them in terms of what they are doing, but you know, as far as the hinterland and that area goes, it's quite separate with separate guiding principles and very different operational parameters. So we know what's going on, and we're in touch regularly. And you know, I'm not too worried that something might be happening and us not knowing about it.
Thank you. I guess the last piece would be around utilities in particular. Is there anything like, have they changed their practices recently and around how they're working in the forest based on all of these recent events and the climate crisis that we're in?
Your Worship, Councillor Curran, so Metro, in terms of their watershed sort of real sort of isolated natural areas, is kind of in the same situation we're in, is where we're literally on the edge of our seats waiting to see what the effects of the heat dome and the looper moth are, to determine what actual next steps are in terms of anything from nothing needs to be done because, well, what I should say is the initial indications now is the mortality may not be as bad as initially thought, when there was a lot of concern given the presence of all of the brown or the look of the forest when we were looking north. Our forestry consultants advised us that it appears that much of those trees, while they suffered during the heat dome, many of them are going to come back. So this is why this current summer field data is so important, because it's going to govern and guide not just our own program going forward, but Metro and even the provincial lands are going to need to wait and see what happens before they decide on in terms of what their detailed management plans are going to be.
Cool. Yeah, I was just specifically thinking of hydro in terms of utilities, but I'm sure that you're aware of what's happening there as well, because I know I've encountered utility work happening sometimes when you're out on the trails and in dry weather. Just wondering what practices are changing given the changes that we're experiencing. So you don't have to necessarily, unless you have something to add on that, but just I guess the point is there's many players involved, and of course working with Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish Nation as well. Like there's many partners involved in the long-term health of the forest.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bond, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Littleton. Mr. Bose, one thought I was having, again, thinking about the effectiveness that the new fees and charges at retaining large diameter trees. And I think, you know, you mentioned in the report and here the ecosystem services that those large diameter trees provide, you know, as well as the emotional attachment that a lot of residents have to those large diameter trees, whether they're Douglas firs or Western red cedars. In our urban areas, is there a sunset to having large diameter trees? You know, I think of our development pattern here in the district is it was all forest, and then it was logged, and some trees were left, and then it was developed for homes. And the large diameter trees we have now are basically the remnants of what was a forested community. Do large diameter trees like Western red cedars and Douglas firs grow new to be 150, 200, 300 years old in an urban environment? But it would be useful when we start talking about our urban forest strategy to understand what that forest might look like, what types of trees and what type of structure. Because it might not be in our generation, but there might be a time where Western red cedars and large diameter Douglas firs don't have a place in our urban area. So I think it would be useful to talk about that, because it would be also, if we're talking about that, it's also helpful to provide some examples for the community of what a healthy urban ecosystem and a forested, whether it's trees or shrubs or smaller diameter trees or deciduous trees or what might be best suited for our future environment, what that environment might look like, so that we're still maintaining those important and hopefully improving those important ecosystem services that can be provided by an urban forest.
Mr. Bose, do you have any comments on that?
Your Worship, Councillor Bond, it's a complex a complex issue, and I'm pretty sure everyone on council might have their own sort of personal vision of what they would like to see our community look like. We don't really know what that's going to be, but hopefully it's going to be the future where we have the right blend of natural and green infrastructure that helps us manage the water so we don't have to manage it with pipe and concrete. It provides the greenness that we've come to know and love about our community, and these other benefits, but in the right context in terms of, you're right on, a 33-foot lot with the basement suite and the 3 parking spot is maybe not the spot to try to force a 120-foot, 100-centimeter diameter Western red cedar. So we got to find the right spot in between something that's going to be the best for our community as a whole.
Thank you very much. Council, I see no further speakers on the matter. I'm prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, council and staff. Next item up is 8.7. This is the North Shore Community Foundation grant request. And I'm the author of this, and the request came in from the board really to assist them with a staff position that they have. It was a very challenging environment over the last 2 years to be able to stick to their commitments to disperse funds and also look after their administrative costs. And so they ended up in a situation where they weren't entirely whole. The truth of the matter is it's more like $35,000 is what it would take to make them entirely whole. But the request came in at about $10,000. One of the challenges they face is that because our normal grant process is for us to grant directly to the end organization, the organization that's actually going to be delivering the project. And that's not really the role of a community foundation. The community foundation is there to build up the endowment to be able to disperse the proceeds of their fund. And so they don't really directly qualify for some of our other avenues to support organizations in the community. And so I felt it was important to bring this matter forward. We certainly want to see the community foundation succeed. They're able to produce quite a number of important social service benefits in our community. I remember during COVID, they raised about $25,000 for the North Shore Disability Resource Center in order to be able to produce a multi-sensory space for children with spectrum and autism disorders, so that they would be able to come out and participate in public spaces and come out to the Canada Day events and have a place that if it gets overwhelming, the family doesn't have to pack up and leave. And some of these kinds of projects are very thoughtful projects to make sure that people have a barrier-free access to public spaces in our community. And I certainly applaud the Community Foundation for being able to support these projects. But at the end of the day, raising money for administration is hard, and people would rather be putting the money directly into projects. And this request came in, and I think it's a reasonable request. So I will be moving this recommendation. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Mary. Councillor Mary, do you have any further comments on it?
Your worship, can we clarify the recommendation on the screen is that council consider it? Is the recommendation that a $10,000 grant be issued to?
So my motion is that the $10,000 grant be issued. Is second, Councillor Mary, is that your second?
Absolutely.
Okay, do you have any further comments, Councillor Mary?
No, I don't.
Okay, any other member of council wishing to speak to the matter? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much, council. Council, we're finished a little bit earlier than with the regular business than we normally have been over the last little bit. So it provides us an opportunity for members of council to make reports. I see Councillors Bond and Hanson have hands up right away. Councillor Bond, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'd like to report on my attendance at the May 19th Metro Vancouver Housing Committee meeting. At that meeting, there was a few topics on the public agenda. One was the committee received an update on cost escalation that has been occurring recently, specifically on our non-market housing projects. And the report noted that between 2010 and 2020, it was an average of about 2.5% to 3% per year cost escalation for construction projects. However, since the start of the pandemic in 2020, the cost escalation has been 15% per year. It's due to a lot of different factors, obviously, and that amount of increase, that significant jump in construction cost prices obviously has an impact on how much housing and the capital costs that Metro Vancouver Housing can deliver. So that was an update that I think is important, not just for Metro Vancouver Housing, but also the district as we move forward with non-market housing on various district-owned lands. The second part of that report that I found interesting and informative was that Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation is actually on track to meet its emissions reduction targets of 45% by 2020. The Metro Vancouver has a very aggressive program around building retrofits and maintenance and asset management. And so with both the new construction that's being planned, the redevelopment of existing sites, and the ongoing maintenance and deep retrofits that are planned on sites that are not planning to be redeveloped, the Metro Vancouver is ahead of schedule for achieving emissions reductions targets. And also Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, in response to the heat dome that happened last summer, is being proactive this year. So protocols and assessments for all of the different housing properties are underway to prepare for ongoing extreme heat, not just for this summer, but also well into the future. So.
Thank you very much. Next report, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm reporting on my attendance on May the 11th at Metro Vancouver's Indigenous Relations Committee. That was, it's now an in-person event. There were presentations on the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons, and particularly the implementation of those principles by the Metro Vancouver governance structure. There were updates on treaty negotiations within the Metro Vancouver area. And we were reminded that June the 21st is the Indigenous Peoples' Day. And I look forward to the district participating in some way in that, marking that day and that event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next speaker I have is Councillor Curran.
I just wanted to report that I was in a meeting with the Climate Action Secretariat to talk about the new community funding that replaced CAREP, which was the, I can't remember the acronym now, so we were talking, it was other elected members talking and just kind of sharing their concerns and issues that we're facing, including the Mayor of Lytton. And it just reminded me when you were talking about the idea of building back, like they're trying to build back very, very differently in Lytton and having a lot of challenges to doing that. So it just reminded me, Mayor Little, when you were talking about building some of the practical challenges that they're having and in the way that the insurance funding isn't covering the cost differential to do actual fire, the proper materials that they need to rebuild. But anyway, there's that was caused a lot of stress to a lot of communities when the CAREP funding was pulled. And so we'll look forward to seeing how we can leverage that for more action in our community and in other communities.
CAREP is Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program for our fun acronym game tonight.
I was like, I can't even, I don't think I ever said what it was. It was always CAREP, but yes, that's a good point.
It was, and when it was removed, it was definitely CAREP. Councillor Back, your report.
Thank you. Just a brief report on my attendance at last week's Manova meeting. It was May the 25th, and just an update as we're getting into tourism season now. Things are starting to get busy down at the museum. We're starting to see a number of different groups coming through, as well as school groups. But through April 23rd, starting April 23rd and through the month of May, there were a number of tourism reps that have come through the museum, and things are getting busy there. Also, one of the recommendations from the governance committee was to look at expanding the size of the commission by 2 members to have representation from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. And this is building on some of the work by the Indigenous Voices Committee. And it's also in our MOUs with both nations. So that was approved by the commission, and now staff will start working on that, engaging with the nations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had a rec commission meeting, but it wasn't a regular commissioners meeting. It was a meeting, like an audit meeting, where they wanted to have everybody's input on how they felt that the rec commission still a valuable commission? Did it service the community the way it should? Could it be better? So everybody fed in their ideas of what they thought, how it would be better, how communication maybe between the city, the district, and the rec commission maybe could be improved, or maybe it was good enough. So it was like an audit meeting. It was very informative. And then just to other pop-ups that I attended that the district staff had done, and one was on affordable housing. And I didn't see a lot of people there, and I was there sort of around dinner time. So I hope that there were more people before or after me, but it was well laid out. The storyboards were well presented. And the other one I just attended was up at Kilmer Park on the weekend for the phase 2 of the Lynn Valley Road. And fortunately, the district managed to set up their table right next to the food venue. So we got some people that were stuck in a lineup that started reading storyboards. But there was interest there. Kilmer Park was just full of it wasn't one of our rainy days. It was a very sunny day. And so it was full of softball, t-ball, kids running all over the place, tripping over dogs. But anyway, it was a good pop-up. So I just wanted to say kudos to staff for those 2 pop-ups.
Thank you very much. My own reports, just one quick one about the Alzheimer's walk that I participated in the other day on Sunday morning in West Vancouver. It was very well attended, and it's something that we're trying to grow on the North Shore. Alzheimer's, dementia, memory care is going to affect almost every one of us at some point, either with a family member or directly personally ourselves. And we have to make sure that we have the resources and supports in place to be able to support people who are going through that, both all the research into it, the people that are currently facing it, and the caregivers, whether they're family or professional or volunteer caregivers, making sure that we're supporting at all levels, because it can be a very terrifying disease for people who are basically trapped in their body and lose their memory capabilities, which is really, you find out how central our memories are to who we are as people. And so I was happy to go and support that. One other report I wanted to make, I made a comment about it a couple of weeks ago and just wanted to reiterate that the TransLink Mayor's Council vision is out for the next round. It's already gone through the main public consultation process, but including a 45-day consultation with First Nations stakeholders specifically. But it also has received a tremendous amount of support from people in the community, and from for the North Shore components, a tremendous amount of support from the other mayors and other regions. So it has a significant number of benefits to the North Shore, including a significant bump in bus service hours, handy dart service hours, bus rapid transit, an additional rapid bus proposed to Lynn Valley. The bus rapid transit process should probably explain. It's going to take some time to go through and explain to the community what that really entails. But at its core, it's a 60-foot electric bus with frequent service and a proper station. So it actually shows a progression in the level of service from rapid bus to bus rapid transit to potentially other technologies. And the other technologies piece is an important part. In the plan, we finally have a plan for an increase to rapid transit for the North Shore. And it is to be delivered at a planning level within the 10 years of the plan, and also with a business case on it. That's where the item gets funded. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on us now. If we can get the region to finalize and ratify this mayor's vision, the pressure goes on to the provincial government and the federal government to be able to fund these initiatives. But I can tell you the last 10-year plan was over 85% funded within its 10-year plan. And so it becomes the clearly articulated priorities to the provincial and federal government, and the pressure is on them to come and support us. And so I'm very optimistic about it. The support that I've had from the regional mayors, very much appreciated. They actually sent the item back to the North Shore mayors to make sure we were satisfied with the wording, that make sure that it was strong enough, that it actually was specific enough about when the priorities were delivered in the plan. We made some minor amendments to staff advice, but it was so great to hear the regional mayors wanting to hear what we needed from TransLink. And so really appreciate the support on that. Councillor Murray, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Well, most of my committees are starting to, our planning committee at Metro Vancouver is winding up, and we are waiting, our council is actually waiting for Metro 2050 to come forward for us to discuss the Metro 2050 bylaw. It went to hearing, and it was unfortunately a very small turnout at the hearing. Less than 10 people came to the hearing for such a massive document and massive implications for the region. It was disappointing. That document and though that report will be coming to our council. And actually, if Mr. Milburn's still on the line, maybe he could advise as to what when it is going to be put on the agenda. Do we know, or Mr. Gordon?
Your Worship, we have that tentatively scheduled for the June 13th regular council agenda. And this is set because we have received the referral and we have 60 days in which to respond to that referral.
Right. Okay,
So,
good. Thank you. I'm glad that we're bringing it forward earlier, given that we break at the end of July. So that will be and is it going to be on a meeting on its own, or is it going to be part of a regular agenda? Because I think we should give it a considerable amount of time for discussion.
Thank you, Worship. We'll raise that matter with the clerk. I know we're looking very carefully at the remaining agendas to ensure that they're not overtaxed. So I really appreciate that feedback.
Right. Thank you. So that'll be an interesting discussion. We have been doing just very pertinent to the discussion earlier on the tree bylaw. At our Parks Committee, we recently received a presentation in regards to tree canopy, and I forwarded you all council some information on that. It's a toolkit that Metro Vancouver has, and it's something that our staff works with Metro Vancouver on in regards to how we move forward on those initiatives. There's some other things, but they're in camera, so I can't share them right now. But some interesting announcements in the future. And I was also able to attend Deep Yacht Club's opening day. Probably one of the coldest opening days they've had. Everybody had their furnace on in their boat. It was a relatively good turnout. They haven't had one, opening days haven't happened for the last little while, obviously, with everything else with COVID. So it was nice to see the boats on the water and brought greetings from the district.
Thank you very much for your report. Okay, Council, I see no further reports this evening, and we've completed the business of this evening's meeting. So at this point, I will accept adjournment. So proposed by Councillor Back, I accept. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much to members of the public, the staff, and council members for all of their work tonight to advance the priorities of our community. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Good night.